You're right when you said all of these books are kind of the same. They all kind of say the same thing: crisis, reaction, humans are the problem, all that. This one is unique because it goes into crafting a religion to go along with the technocratic implementation and a kind of syncretist pantheism and techniques to retool archetypes and images to make man fit into a collective. So it's all about collectivism and deindustrializing the West, mainly through psychological warfare and social engineering. That's what the textbook is about. And it's telling the government class, the elite class, bureaucrat class, how to master these techniques to implement it. It's literally written for them. It's a systems analysis. It's a social engineering grad work for political elites, like you said, people going into the Kissinger chair. It's dozens and dozens of U.S. universities and graduate schools, MIT, Harvard, all of that, Rockefeller Foundation. It's all of the universities that are sort of, peak Ivy League universities.
PhD level textbook.
Correct. Yeah. And it goes for $2,000 on Amazon because it's really rare. You cannot find this except for you can find the PDF. You can't find actual copies of it. So thank God there was a young dude that just mailed me a copy. So I appreciate that. But yeah, the first page, like page 1, it gets in right away to Uthant of the United Nations says we're going to have to create a technocratic global government because if we don't, there'll be too many people. And that's the overriding master goal. This was written in 1982. I do not wish to seem overdramatic, but he says, as Secretary General of the United Nations, we have only a few years before we have to disarm. And by the way, disarmament doesn't just mean getting rid of nukes. It means nobody has self-defense. Uthant goes on to say that in order to save the environment, we must get rid of the population. It's not actually a conspiracy text. It's how are we going to create and dominate the ideology of the next era, the next aeon? But you have to retool the cultural archetypes. That's why so much of the pop culture is toxic, it's degraded, it's degenerate, is because it's retooling your idea of yourself and of the rest of society and the world. And all the NGOs, think tanks, foundations kind of working together to set up a deindustrialized, post-industrial West. They talk about post-industrialism multiple times throughout the text.
What page are we on now? I want to keep following this.
Well, this is just in the first few pages. I'm not even to any of the quotes yet, but just within page 18 and 19, it's about deindustrialization of the West and how education throughout the United States has to be shifted into this model of not giving children, reading, writing, arithmetic, that kind of stuff, but socializing them. And not just that, Wilhelm Reich, another one of the Frankfurt School guys, kind of a quack. Reich said that we have to have total sexual liberation. So women have to be given total feminist programming, brainwashing, all of that. So this is identical to what you get in the Frankfurt School people.
And again, even before this in the 60s, LBJ says great society to break up the black family to control them. Blacks have literally had their culture, so has everybody else, but them first, wrecked, just taking out the father figure. You take that out, they know what they had first.
But it's also raising the woman, the female archetype to be something like a goddess or akin to a goddess. And so this text, with many other texts, actually says promote goddess worship, promote all that kind of stuff.
Oh, the whole Rio de Janeiro thing in 92 was about worshiping the goddess.
This is about that. It's exactly the same as the Rio text in terms of the overall game plan, absolutely. Man has to be seen as identical to nature. Man is not above nature. He's not given a dominion mandate in Genesis by God. He's just another part of the natural process. And once he accepts that, all of his prejudices about himself, being unique, being made in the image of God, having this kind of divine potential in him, that has to all be gotten rid of.
It's about removing the divine.
But also your concept of yourself and that you don't see other people as that so that they're disposable. So if you can control the images of man and what man sees, and here it talks about what the images and icons will be exactly, dreaming man and so forth, that's where you can contact the entities and the demons, is this unconscious realm in their scheme. And man can learn to channel these energies, it says on the next page, 127, in order to control the human computers. And they're not saying that individuals can do this, they're saying that they're going to do this, they're going to control men. But it goes on to quote Sir Julian Huxley, who is the author of the UNESCO document, The Philosophy of UNESCO, which is rebranding eugenics into biometrics. But he says that we move away from thinking about everybody having their own rights, having their own private economic exchange. All of it has to be retooled into collectivism. So basically, It's how to re-engineer man's view of himself and of the world. And the best way to do that is to create and retool a new religious fervor, a new Weltanschauungskrieg, which is just a new worldview.
And then everything comes out of it is cut our son's genitals off, forced euthanasia, total hell.
Well, this is all the same people at Tavistock. So Tavistock's behind all that. That's the premier British think tank out of the UK, all about pioneering the transhumanist movement and the transgender movement. Those all go together.
It's written so evil, so anti-human. This is published, funded by the government, used at all the top universities, and it's written literally like Cobra Commander wrote it. I mean, it is out of the open. We're going to kill you.
Yeah.
Ruling priesthood, technocrat, mad scientist Bible.
One of the Fabian socialists, George Bernard Shaw, said, "You will come to us to decide whether or not we'll let you live." That's the attitude of what we're talking about here. The book goes on to say that early on in America in the 1980s, already most churches and synagogues are social justice organizations. So this is 1982. They're saying that the religious organizations are already kind of on board with it. We don't have to worry too much about those. What we really need to do is create a kind of a new religion. It goes on, as I said, to quote Jonas Salk. Again, in this book, all of the people that I've lectured through over the last several years, they cite Jonas Salk, they cite John C. Lilly, Jose Delgado. There's a whole chapter on MKUltra and applying it to religion.
Promoting CIA mind control for the general public.
This is in one of the chapters that's heavy on MKUltra. You can see here they're talking about yoga, hypnosis, biofeedback. They're citing John C. Lilly, the guy who wrote Programming and Metaprogramming in the Human Biocomputer. He pretty much dominates this whole chapter. They're talking about Abraham Maslow, whose whole hierarchy of needs was part of MKUltra research, by the way. They're talking about esoteric wisdom, citing B.F. Skinner, the behaviorists, all that. But notice here it says, in this hierarchy of the human programming, so they view the human psyche like a computer program that you can program and alter and change. And they actually say here, the highest levels of the metaprogramming deal with contacting spiritual entities. They talk about the future religion will be essentially focused on various occult practices, perennial philosophy, and they cite the Vedas, Rosicrucians, and Theosophy. The entire chapter, I think it's chapter 4 here, 4 and 5, are all citations of multiple MKUltra doctors. So they cite Dr. John C. Lilly, who did a lot of pioneering work with brain chips, with monkeys, dolphins, all that kind of stuff. He was a mega psychonaut, tripping balls all the time. They cite Dr. Jose Delgado multiple times, who wrote Physical Control of the Brain, one of the famous MKUltra doctors. It cites Norbert Wiener because cybernetics is a huge part of this because MKUltra turns into cybernetics and
Explain what Iconaut is.
Psychonauts are all those guys like Tim Leary and Terrence McKenna and all those guys that were, doing all the hallucinogens and tapping into other entities to try to get information. And you've talked about this. People kind of laugh about it. This actually discusses, there's a chapter on that. In this book, they say, in the religion of the future that we're bringing in, we will normalize shamanic traditions and tap into channeling entities. They actually talk about at subconscious levels, especially with people with fractured, MKUltra type fracturing, they're able to more easily channel these entities. Yeah, page 133 talks about Carl Jung's collective unconscious is very appropriate to understanding controlling the human biocomputer. He goes on to talk about the strategies and the plan for new man, right? So the new man will be humanistic capitalism. So this is really just a kind of socialism. It says that you won't be doing economic activities that promote human growth and success because it will be a post-materialist form of capitalism. So that's basically Fabian socialism.
And that goes back to the Carnegie thing after World War I. They wanted a post-human world. They said in competition.
No more competition is exactly what that's about. Perennial philosophy is the next section on religious attitudes of the future, where they're going to take the religion. They're going to go into traditional lore primitive peoples, not because they're interested in finding the truth in those religions. All religions do have truth, but they're picking out the things that will make you a collectivist. That's essentially the basics of this. The attitude of other people will be to get rid of territories. The ethic is no nation states, no territories, no borders. Everybody is part of the same human collective. So over and over and over, most of this book just kind of repeats the same point.
And if we put up the leftists taking their Pfizer shots or Antifa or just the average leftist, they look like their soul's been sucked out. We know this is evil.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's mad scientists, and they list all the mad scientists. And John C. Lilly is cited the most in this book. He's one of the top cited authors in the text. And again, there's multiple editors and whatnot. And this entire MKUltra chapter that we're talking about here is about taking all the research from Jose Delgado, John C. Lilly, who, like you said, It's not just that he was in, ketamine tanks, in the float tanks, getting information from these hierarchical groups of aliens saying to depopulate. In his autobiography, Timothy Leary comes on and says at the beginning that John C. Lilly is kind of the voice of the new aeon. And they actually say it'll be a Luciferian aeon where basically humans are structured like a computer. You have the, in the Freudian system or the Carl Jungian system, the unconscious, the id, the ego, superego, all of that is appropriated, as well as images that are similar from ancient religious texts, Hinduism and whatnot. And how humans don't just get this information externally, like John Locke said, or people out of the Enlightenment. We already have a genetic predisposition, but we're also informed by the environment of epigenetics. So the book talks about how both biology of the man and his brain chemistry has to be retooled, as well as the external environment imprinting. So they talk about controlling both aspects. And by doing this, they can retool man to create a new man. And even perhaps through mastering DNA and genetics, we can talk to aliens. And if we talk to aliens and learn how to clone, engage in genetic engineering from the information that we get from the exobiological extraterrestrial origins of life.
And you're reading that?
Page 82. Yeah, right here. So it says that we're going to be studying off-world life. We're going to be studying how to plant life off-world the way that the aliens perhaps planted us here. And again, here's Jose Delgado, the most famous, one of the most famous of the MK Ultra doctors here on page 83, talking about controlling the brain. And this is coming out of the text that he wrote, Physical Control of the Mind. And these are not fringe people. These are people working at the American Psychological Association. These are people working at all the universities across the West. And the next page talks about what could this lead to? Something like Brave New World or 1984. Jose Delgado, again, cited. So this is the Priest of Power. Psychedelic drugs, transcendental experiences. This will not just be kind of the 1960s counterculture experiment. This will be more and more normalized, perhaps through big pharma, things like that. And in Brave New World, everybody's taking soma, they're taking these different drugs. They're kind of a mix between hallucinogen and like ecstasy, because everybody has orgies all the time. But here they're saying basically that this is going to be central to the religion of the future. In Huxley's Wars of Perception, he says that this might even be the sacrament of the future. Moves into talking about, people have probably heard about remote viewing. This is all the same people involved in Stanford Research, Stargate Project, remote viewing, Gateway Process. Those are all very similar projects connected to MK Ultra explicitly, especially the Gateway Process. And as it says here, telepathy, clairvoyance, precognition, psychokinesis, ESP, physical bilocation. I mean, they're not saying you can necessarily do this, but this is where they want to take things. They even cite another MK Ultra, Dr. Gregory Bateson, who talked about how to capture human imagination in order to really mind control. And things like Disney, Bell Labs, von Neumann, all of these technocrats are cited here.
It's Bell Labs that came up with the transistor, everything.
Yep. And they're part of MK Ultra. This section is quoting Gregory Bateson talking about Bell Labs and von Neumann and cybernetics, and that we've eaten the tree of knowledge. And if we study Norbert Wiener and his cybernetic models, feedback loops, then we can master the human domain, the human mind, and control man. And man will become essentially an automaton. The entities that they keep talking about, it's about the aliens being demons. The religion of the future is speaking to contacting our alien creators. These entities that just happen to tell us that we got to get rid of man and we got to depopulate. So here's a great quote here on page 117. To foster a smooth transition to a benign post-industrial and eventually planetary society, it has to be absorbed into the lives of the people and the institutions of the society without the disruption that accompany most revolutions. They're saying they're going to implement a revolution. It's going to be against the entire history of Western civilization, all the way back to the ancient Greeks, to Europeans, etc. They cite people from the Committee of 300, like Sir Jeffrey Vickers, social ethics and whatnot. This is all to... The oppression narrative is a weapon. So they take the people that are supposedly oppressed and they say that if we raise those people above, it's going to create equality. But actually what it is putting those people in power to then punish, the Western white European peoples. They do that on purpose, and the book talks about it. There's a paper that a psychologist wrote called Virtuous Victimhood and the Dark Triad Traits. It just tells you basically that in a society that worships and values egalitarianism, very cunning narcissistic people can figure out a way to gain traction and social traction through the highest levels of victimhood. So you present yourself as a perpetual ultimate victim, and in egalitarian societies, everybody sort of gives that traction, attention, money, etc. So it promotes the dark triad traits, narcissism, psychopathy, etc. so that in that society, those the people that get to the top, the most narcissistic, the most cunning, the most psychopathic, can get ahead in a so-called egalitarian society. It goes on and says that, well, who's going to lead this? Who are going to be some of the key characters that would be leading this? They say that the leader of the future is a combination of a yogi and a commissar. That's the guru of the future.
So it's Yoda.
But a communist Yoda.
Yes.
Yeah. So communist Yoda. And then what's the religion that communist Yodas are going to push? The idea that man and God are identically the same. There's no difference between man is just a version of God. There is no God. It's just man is God. How do we get to that? Collectivism, total collectivism. Man is the enemy. The new image that we'll cultivate understands that on spaceship Earth, too many people is a problem and man is the actual enemy. We've met the enemy and the enemy is us. So if you look here on page 126, you'll see again, Teilhard de Chardin, who was the satanic Jesuit who basically thought everybody's going to become God. Perennial philosophy from Huxley, Fabian socialist Arnold Toynbee, Carl Jung, they're all cited as thinkers for the new age.
And take Carl Jung. We already have these archetypes God put in us. A lot of this stuff is true, but it's how they twist it and where it's leading you. You see what I'm saying?
Well, they're appropriating Carl Jung. So they take a lot of his archetypal imagery throughout this book. I mean, images is an icon, right? Icons are imagery. And what people see image-wise, it imprints them. The MK Ultra doctors call it imprinting or re-imprinting.
It's so on record what they're doing. And then Robert Maxwell, I forgot, Ghislaine Maxwell's dad is the publisher from the MI6, Mossad, CIA, human trafficking, child trafficking. That's who the Pentagon and Stanford research is publishing. And then they're just out in the open with this operation and then with biometrics to carry out our extermination.
The question is, though, what is the solution? And one of the global elites himself, Jacques Attali, in his book, Brief History of the Future, says that there will be a Christian awakening. There's going to be a bunch of people who turn to Christianity, especially in America and in the West. He says we have to watch for that. We have to have a prepackaged religion there for them to dupe them. That's essentially what this book is about. I didn't actually know when I read this that it's largely about religion and how the global elite will need to steer religion, changing images of man.
Amazing. Prepared by the Center for the Study of Social Policy, SRI International, with Stanford Research, which is right at the top of all of this. You wonder with weather modification, chemtrails, it's all out of these groups. So good to have you here, Jay Dyer, jaysanalysis.com, YouTube Jay Dyer on X, as well Jay Dyer, author, comedian, TV presenter, known for his deep analysis of Hollywood geopolitics and culture. His graduate work focused on psychological warfare and film, and he is the author of a whole bunch of books, Esoteric Hollywood 1 and 2, and the co-creator and co-host of the television show Hollywood Decoded. He has been featured everywhere.